Okay, folks, I have a double duel here this morning. Both Harris and Rob Kligman are here with me today. I'm super excited about this because it's taken forever to plan it. And second of all, it's not very often I get a gentleman who's been a member of the military, a fellow writer like myself, and he's got about 18,000 more talents than I do. Rob, my first question to you is why was it important for you to have the world see Harris's work?
So growing up, I was always very impressed with my father and his travels and his business acumen. Trying to get all of that information and the people he's met into words and into a book that friends, family, and interested people could actually learn from and enjoy was really the motivating factor for me. It also allowed me to know a lot more about dad throughout the writings. So whether we were proofing a book or even having a fun sort of argument at the table with my mother and my dad talking about punctuation, it still brought out that sense of really getting to understanding who my father is. And due to his travels early in life, this was an amazing outlet that, again, not a lot of sons get a chance to spend this kind of quality time and really understand and learn the inside story of their father, who had a very complex and interesting adulthood. So for me, it was just an awesome opportunity.
You bet. When you first had this idea, did you go to your mom and all and say, "Hey, how is dad going to take to this?" Was there any reservation because your dad isn't 21 anymore? And as we age, it is harder to write. It's harder to be disciplined. It's harder to take this sort of thing on. Were there conversations or communications with her at all?
The biggest reservation was that dad doesn't embellish stories, doesn't really tell too much. So for me, it was, can I get it out of him in a way where he's willing to offer up that information?
Sure.
So for me, this outlet offered that opportunity. And the reservation was, again, dad doesn't love his name in lights, doesn't look for the press. It's something that I really enjoy doing because I figure the more people that hear his story, the more people that are going to enjoy those stories. So not as much reservation. It was just how are we going to do it? And from that point on, I did my due diligence, figured out that the self-publishing was the best route because we would have 100% control of the cover, the content, and the distribution. And
Yep.
we all agreed that COVID was a perfect time frame to roll this out because many people were indoors. They were looking for some enjoyment and entertainment, and we had a little bit extra time to make this happen.
Oh, gotcha. Now, if I were to ask you, in terms of the two of you, because there's two generations right here, what's the biggest similarity and the biggest difference between the both of you?
Mhm. I- I'll go first. I think
Mm.
the biggest similarity is we're I would say competitive in a good way. We like to do things right and we like to get them going and moving in the right direction together. And the differences between the two, gosh, Dad, the biggest difference,
Rivalry to some extent.
yeah, a little rivalry, right? To try to continue to do a little bit better each time.
I was always proud of Rob. He would take a difficulty and find a way to break it in pieces and solve the problem. And it had reflections of what I did with my dad, who always said that in order to solve any difficulty, the key ingredient is to remain calm. I've noticed that when Rob played ball, and he was an excellent athlete, getting a scholarship to play baseball and eventually watching Rob play the World Series when his school was able to achieve that. Um, it brought a lot of memories back, and I could see things that I had hoped for as a parent come to fruition through Rob and his brother, who have always tried to excel, taking what was available and making it into a bigger and more meaningful success. He refused to admit defeat at any time. And it reminded me of a quotation from a man that I have a great deal of respect for, Nelson Mandela, who was a social and political activist in South Africa, who said, I never lose. I win or I learn. And if I had to apply that to Rob, it fits him to a T. He is a son that has made us proud.
Yeah, and I think growing up playing sports, I could be injured on the field, but dad never ran on the field. He waited for me to proactively break down the issue, my injury, and get myself up and run run off the field. So you learn a lot about early life in that instance, that some things are going to come and hit you hard, but you got to pick yourself back up and continue motoring on. And I think more than anything, that's the real big trait that I took away that has powered me through my career, because there's ups and downs in life and there's ups and downs in the workplace. And to be able to know you can handle those allowed me to really be successful.
Right.
Also, just Cindy, just one other thing with Nelson Mandela, who was a brilliant man, who also said there's no disgrace to fall.
Mm-hmm.
Disgrace or difficulty is to pick yourself back up. Those who are able to do that and move on and learn from that experience are those who succeed. The other people look for excuses why they didn't. And I always wanted to succeed. It was important that I impart this into my children. You don't have to be the best at anything, but you have to be as good as your potential allows. And
Nice.
that's what we lived our life. Yes.
Very nice. Okay, Rob, I got two more questions for you, and then we'll get to the big guy here. So my other question is this. I interviewed tons and tons of people all year round. And so when you're dealing with someone like Harris, and I'm guessing before this, he didn't have a whole lot of media experience or being in front of the camera and doing interviews. So how do you prepare your dad? Because there's that element that's your parent, and then there's the element that's the professional, where you have to be like, listen, we're going on camera, we're doing all these interviews. So how did you get him acclimated to our world here in the media world? I should say media coached, really.
So dad is always the master of ceremonies and can really command a room. So I never doubted that if I put him in front of the camera, he could speak really well. He also knows his stories. He knows his stories really well. So my preparation is mainly getting him to understand who the interviewer is. So building a pretty big bio on you, Cindy, as an example, getting him comfortable with understanding who he's speaking to and where that information may be going. But from a perspective of speaking, the one best part about me putting my PR hat on
Yep.
is that he's a natural. I can let him be in any room he wants to be in, and he's able to speak. And this is an exciting time. It's a second chapter for him, and for me, it's something that most children will never get a chance to do. So he knows these stories well. I am amazed at the amount of time he can put into these books and their knowledge and the people that he represents and brings to life in these books. So for that matter, I don't have to do too much preparation, which is a press PR person's blessing.
Yes, absolutely. So before I let you go, of course, tell everybody who you are.
So from my perspective, my background, I have 25 plus years in advertising and sponsorship sales and marketing. I'm based out in Stamford, Connecticut. I've worked for a variety of different companies, from MTV to Sports Illustrated. So I've had a great deal of opportunities and experience with both startups and mature companies, but I've really enjoyed this side of the business, from how do you reinvent someone's second chapter and how do you bring that forth to the massive audience that's out there that loves reading books and listening to books. And I've had a good opportunity to just learn through the process. And if anyone wants to get a hold of me, LinkedIn is probably the best. I think that's Cindy, where we first
Yep.
met. And I had emailed you from there. But like you said, I am pretty attentive to my email and my
Yep.
conversations. I'm always willing to meet and learn from somebody else. So feel free to reach out. But I really appreciate this opportunity.
We're onward to Harris now.
Awesome.
Okay, Rob, thank you.
Okay. Okay, lots and lots of questions. First question that I want to talk to you about is, you were on book number 12. So we'll start it there and then we'll move our way backwards. After doing 12 books, I'd like to find out, for this particular book, the newest one, is there something you learned about yourself as a writer that you didn't know about yourself when you first started out?
Not really, Cindy. I've always, I guess the orchestra to start playing, but I've always had confidence in myself.
Okay.
I never doubted. I learned a lot from my dad, who both parents were immigrant parents from Russia. I'll just tell you a very brief story. My dad lost his father when he was 16 years of age. He had two siblings, a brother and a sister. And at 16 years old, he became the head of a family. His mother spoke a little English, not much. And my dad somehow managed to graduate high school and found out, took a job as a taxi driver. He found out during the time he was driving a taxi that in Philadelphia, they had an examination which someone could take. And if you passed it, it was equivalent to 4 years of college. So during the downtime when my dad didn't have an affair for a taxi, he would study, took the examination, passed it, went and applied to law school at Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Dickinson Law School. He was accepted. And when he was telling the story, I said, Dad, how did you afford law school? You had no money. He said there were taxis in Carlisle, Pennsylvania to drive, son. And I thought to myself, yeah, I guess there were, Dad. And I said, where did you live? He said, I hooked up in a flop house. I collected cardboard and old newspapers, which I used as my bedding and my sheets. And 3 years later, I became a lawyer. The moral of that story, or what he was trying to tell me, is that the word can't never should be in your vocabulary. All you have to do is remember this story that I told you. You didn't say it that way, but that was the intent. That if I did what I did, you can do whatever you can do. And the word can't should never apply. It's the most important lesson that I have ever learned. And I endeavored to impart this on my sons through various ways as they grew up. And I think it is adhered to them. And they do not look at defeat as a all ending thing, but it's just a stop along the way. And then they continue.
You bet. Now, putting out this kind of content, and we're all writers to some degree, at least tons of people that I've spoken to have written something at some point in time and published it. My question to you is, writer's block. It sounds to me like you never have writer's block. In fact, from what I'm seeing, I'm like, he just keeps producing and producing without it. So do you ever get stuck? And if you do, what do you do to get unstuck?
No, I never do, Cindy. I don't have writer's block. My writing style is very unorthodox. As I was laughing with Rob this morning, I usually take a shower, I think of the next book, and I think of a title. That's where it all begins, and in a way, it all ends that way. I sit down at a typewriter, I type in the title, I think of my character, whether it will be female or male, to start us off, and I sit down and I write. When I get tired or I just don't feel like doing it anymore, I close it out, come down the next day. I only write in the morning, usually between 9 and 11. It may only be for 45 minutes, it may only be a paragraph, but I learned early on that you must write every single day until that novel is finished. It could be a chapter, could be 2 chapters, it could be a paragraph, but you must write every day. That's my only rule that I adhere to. Sometimes I just sit at that computer and I might go on for 2 hours. Other times I sit at 15 minutes and I don't want to do it anymore. I enjoy writing. I have no concept of where I'll take it beyond the title. But as I say, I take frequent showers and I get frequent titles. And I've looked forward to this 12th book, which is entitled A Woman to Die For.
Yes.
And I thought I'd take a little different twist instead of the mystery, spy, and adventure. And I'd get into the AI, the artificial intelligence, where
Oh,
my main characters, and I love to write where women are my main characters. I have a high respect for women. I've dealt with them overseas. I've been with them in good and bad situations, and I have a high respect for them. They are unlike men, they don't get as rattled. They see the end. They can envision what they have to do to get there. Anyway, most of the novels that I have has a strong woman character in it. So anyway, I decided with this AI now appearing everywhere, I'd get two women, a woman at least anyway, but it turns into two women who work together in a facility in Greenwich, Connecticut that makes robots. And these are two programmers that give these robots their life, their knowledge, their ability, and I take it from there. And I interwove into the story a relationship that one of the women gets involved in, and he is also involved as an American with a Chinese communist who then discover the facility and a little bit about it.
hmm,
And one thing leads to another where they want to get the hold of the robot, and I won't ruin it for anybody.
of
And
course.
we will go up and down, sideways from there.
Gotcha. Now you mentioned AI, and there is a huge this topic gets brought up a lot. And I know that there are a lot of writers and a lot of filmmakers and even actors, of course, that are very concerned that AI is going to be incredibly intrusive and unnecessary and that we probably don't need it. However, here you are writing and incorporating AI. What is your stance on AI as a whole, meaning as a writer yourself? Are you at all worried or concerned about the influence of AI as it relates to our field?
I think the unknown is always somewhat concerning because unless something is proved and tried and established, one has certain reservations about it. With AI, there are a number of difficulties. The dark side of it is where perpetrators can use AI to enhance their ability to con someone,
Yep.
to endanger someone. On the other side, AI could be a revolution both in medical and in many business endeavors that could bring the world closer, maybe a more peaceable world. I think a lot of things are out there, and those who can grasp it and those who can run with it are going to benefit initially from it, might even become extremely rich by it. But more importantly, I think it offers an opportunity for a better place for a lot of people to be, both to interact, both to live. Maybe through it, AI, more people will get to understand their fellow inhabitant of this planet. Maybe by that understanding, fewer wars, fewer difficulties, fewer hardships, fewer poverty could result from it. So I'm encouraged by the thought that it could bring a number of positive factors into play.
Wow, very nice. Okay. Now, I've heard that you have literally written to exhaustion. So here's my question for you. Um, we're starting to age a little bit, at least I can feel it. I know that you're very young and spirited. So the question then becomes, do you ever get concerned? Do your loved one gets concerned? Because with any passion that you have as an occupation, if it's overdone, if you're doing too much, it can have an actual physical or mental effect on you. So when you say writing to exhaustion, we're not doing that frequently, are we? Or we're not having side
No,
effects, are we?
no, I am not. I find that writing brings me back to a period of my life which covered about 30 years over three continents of constant travel: South America, Africa, and the Far East. I lived in Seoul, Korea for about 4.5 years.
Sure.
I was a practitioner of their martial arts called Hapkido, got a black belt at the end of 3 years, learned a language, etc. I find that when I recall these memories, they are of good times, not easy times, good
Mhm.
times, where I managed to achieve successes in so many different ways. I am a retired military officer,
Oh,
Army officer. I've gone to airborne and ranger school. I'm an intelligence officer and I'm cross trained as an infantry officer. Many of the people with whom I interacted in my civilian career were military dictatorships, such as Indonesia. I had a common bond because they knew I was a military guy. And if they didn't, I made sure they did.
ah,
Once that was entered into the equation, we were able to talk about certain things. There was an element of trust that you have to build between people. I was able to do that. I respected who they are. I didn't find reason to say you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that. Not that I was in a place to do that anyway.
hmm,
If they ruled their country and they ruled it the way they wanted, fine. I was there to do business.
sure.
And I was successful in doing it. And I enjoyed the relationships that I've had with many of these people.
Nice. Very
And these are the people with whom I've interacted with over 30 years. Some are good, some are really bad dudes, and some bad women, and some in between. All these people that I met are stored up between my ears. When I
mm,
finally started to write, the interesting part about writing is I was away so much that when I would take a plane back to New York and finally to Connecticut, I would feel guilty. I was away. My wife was the husband and the father and had to fix the cars and drive the kids to school. I was never around when the pipes broke. I wrote some children's stories
yes.
and got home on yellow line paper. I was able to sit down with my boys and at least read the children's stories. We would laugh, have fun. The other more interesting novels, these were just things that were stored away, events that I had, situations I faced myself in, good, bad, and indifferent. There was, I'll tell you just one quote, war story, unquote. I don't know whether it was in Sierra Leone or Suriname, but the individual who I had gotten in contact with and we were doing business together, a Lebanese guy, picked me up at the hotel. And I thought we were going to his office, and we come up in front of a large stone walled enclosure. I knew right away, Cindy, it was a prison. I see a bunch of women sitting in the lining the wall of the prison on either side of the main door. Little children, not a man among them over 7 years old, baskets of fruit and vegetables, etc. Anyway, we go into the prison. I'm introduced to the commandant. We spend 15 or 20 minutes touring the prison. We get out. I shake hands. We get back in the car. We start driving away. I turn to my host and I said, "What in the H was that all about?" And he looks back at me and he says, "That, Harris, is to tell you that if you don't come through with the agreement that we make with any of these people, you are going to vacation there." And I thought that was novel. I thought that was a nice
Yeah,
way
I'd
of
say
getting your
so.
message across. And I,
Gosh.
and I just finished a book called Life in the Dark Side, and I included that little story in there.
Nice.
Got
Oh
it
my
in.
gosh.
But that is the kind of thing that I was involved in. And in such various countries, as I mentioned, many dictatorships, Indonesia, I got to know a woman who we referred to as a dragon lady. And she had contact with the Department of Trade in Indonesia, and it was ruled by Sukarno, a dictator at that time, a military dictatorship. And through the Dragon Lady, I was able to meet the Department of Trade individual, who was also a general. And after hiring one of his nephews, which was an easy way to solidify my situation there,
Sure.
we started to do business. But these are the kind of things that I had to do in order to get my company entrenched in these various places.
Right.
It was an adventurous life. I've met these people, as I say, all these instances are stored between my ears. And your question once was, don't I get writer's fatigue, etc.? On the contrary, I enjoy writing because it keeps me active.
Ah,
It,
yes.
people, I see many of the contemporaries that I have, they're either on the way to dementia or they already are full blown.
Right.
I want to get like that. I want to keep my mind active. I'm physically in pretty good shape. As I say, I was a military guy for 20 years. I know what exercise and what keeping in condition needs
Right.
to be. And we do that. And I've managed to reach this latter stage of my life in very good condition with all my mental facilities intact.
Gosh, that's
And I
lovely.
recall so many things
Well, and you're
that
only 50, right? About 50 years
I'm,
old?
I'm going to say I'm 61, and
That's great.
we'll leave it at that.
That's
No,
absolutely
if I
right.
told you how old I was, we'd both faint.
Oh my gosh. Now, I understand that you have said before that Connecticut is your writing haven. So here's a good question. If I took Harris out of Connecticut and put him somewhere else, do you think you'd be able to write effectively, or do you think the environment really is part of it for you?
Oh, no, it would make no difference because I could be in a basement, a bedroom, or a kitchen. And all these stories of people that I've interacted with all come back. I've never forgotten them. I will embellish on certain stories because it fits my direction in which I want to take it. But all these people are real people that I've met, changed to the degree that fit my story. But I never run out of them because I have 30 plus years of
Sure.
international travel on 3 continents where I've met good, bad, and indifferent, and they're all stored up there. Never did I think I would write a book, but I always believed that inside everyone there is a book to be written.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you've written different kinds of genres, so here's a good question for you. For a gentleman who writes things like short stories and novels, and I know the genres in which you normally write, I was really surprised that you ventured into children's books because that's a different kind of genre, different
Yes.
kind of audience, etc. For you, why the leap to that? Because it seems like the thriller, spy, all those kinds of things are really your thing. That's like kind of your main beat. So why the alteration?
Because I have an interesting imagination. I can
Ah,
take
okay.
myself to places that some people will say, how long did he spend in an insane asylum? Sometimes not long enough, but I've always been able to tell a story, an impromptu story. And as I say, I used to write these little short stories on a plane ride home so I could sit with the boys and tell them this, that, and the other thing. And we'd laugh. They were young. They couldn't handle the kind of stories I write now, but they could understand the word man. And in all my stories, children's stories, there is a moral.
Oh,
There's one children's book I've written called Mr. Day and Mr. Night.
okay.
And the essence of that story is that Mr. Day thought he was more important because he brought the sunlight, people could work. Mr. Day thought he was more important because people could go to sleep and refresh themselves, etc., etc. Eventually, they decide to have an argument and split, and the world became a difficult place because it was daylight for 24 hours, it was dark for 20, it kept
Sure.
rotating until they found that the outcry of the people on earth was to such an extent that they felt they had to do something to get their situation righted. And they found out through conversation that they were both important. Not only was night important to allow people to sleep, rest, etc. Mr. Day was important to allow people to work, earn a living, blah, blah, blah. And they mutually agreed at the break of time where daylight becomes night becomes day, that they were both needed. And the moral of that story is you can't judge someone just by their appearance, that people are needed. They all serve a function, they all represent a future. Uh, and this was my story for Mr. Day and Mr. Night.
Very
And it is just that kind of thing, always with a moral at the end.
cool. Okay. I get
You
you.
know, I get a lot of pleasure out of that. It's not hard for me to write children's stories. I enjoy it just as well as I do for the novels.
Nice.
In
Now,
fact, in some cases, Cindy, get more pleasure out of that because I
really?
know a child will read it, they will learn from it. I have one book called The Alphabet Gang. It's going to teach them to understand the alphabet and say it, but I've
Mhm.
taken a different twist on how the alphabet came to be. I've made it so it's my story.
Hmm.
And then at the end, they can smile and read the alphabet with their mom or dad as they read the book.
Look
So
at
it's a
that.
lot of fun.
Now, this is an interesting twist too, because I know a lot of writers don't always opt to put together book trailers, and I know that you've done that. So I'd like you to speak on that a bit because most of us usually when we release a book, we're doing a tour, etc., and all that, and we don't really think about doing a book trailer. And so tell me a bit about why you think that's important to do when you're releasing a book.
I think number one, a person is always hesitant with regard to trying something new.
Hmm.
If it's an author he hasn't read before, he might be hesitant. There was a South African author that I read continuously called Wilbur Smith, and he's a excellent writer. I would look for his future books and want to get one. If you haven't had an exposure to someone, you need to get it out there to make it interesting enough for that individual to say, let me give it a try. Let me try this. Let me read an excerpt from it. Let me find out if it's something I might enjoy reading. And then hopefully they pick it up. They keep turning the pages. And at the end of the book, they close the cover and say, boy, that was 6 or 10 or 12 or 4 days well spent. And that's what I try to do with my readers. I want them to end the book saying, well spent. My time was well spent. I enjoyed it. And that's what I try to do. As I think every time, if I'm able to bring someone pleasure, to take them away from their troubles, take them to a place a country, a situation they will never experience, and make them aware and get them involved so much so they become part and parcel of my characters. And that page has to be turned, and the next one, and the next one. And when they reach the end, they smile and say, "Time well spent.
Hmm.
I've enjoyed it." An author can't ask for more than that. That's what I endeavor to do. I want to entertain. I want to educate. There are always facts in my book, always facts. Although most of it is fiction, 99%, I always bring in facts that people can learn about, whether it's a situation in the Congo where cobalt is mined and children of very early age, 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, work these cobalt mines. And because of the terrible conditions, die at an early age. I want these people to be aware of it. I bring these into my story where I mention 43% of the children who work in the cobalt mines never reach adulthood.
Mhm.
Terrible situation. How many people would know that? How many people would know children work in cobalt mines in the Congo? Very few, but they do. And as I say, I always bring these kinds of things into my books.
Yes. Now, doing my research, I did discover, of course, that you attended Temple University, but it doesn't say what your degrees are in.
What did I do there? Or
For Temple University, I couldn't find any place that stated what you majored in, as in I know
oh,
that you got
yeah,
the 2 degrees.
I can tell you, I went to Temple, majored in business administration
That's it. Okay.
and ROTC. My
Ah,
dad once told me, he says to me before I entered college as I was graduating high school, he said to me, "Son," he says, "do you want to lead or follow?" And I said, "I don't understand your question, Dad."
sure.
He says, "You're going in the military. People are being drafted. Do you want to be an officer? Do you want to be enlisted men?" I said, "I'd like to lead. I'd like to be an officer." He says, "There's something at school called ROTC, Reserve Officers Training Course. You take it along with your studies. If you successfully pass the course, at the end of 4 years, you'll be a commissioned officer." So, like everything else, I respected my dad. I decided I'd do it. Never regretted, never looked back. So I majored in business administration and ROTC as an undergraduate. After my 2 years of active military service, I came back and got a master's degree, an MBA at Temple, and one of 12 people that graduated. And after I did that, my career began.
There you go. Now, we live in a world in 2024 where I've been hearing more and more people saying that even going out into the job force after being in college and getting the education isn't necessarily a guarantee. And most are really squeamish about attending college or even going to college at this point. Because you are a little bit older and a little bit wiser, what would you say to folks these days? Would you say that yes, that college education without a doubt is a necessity for success?
I think that you need a college education. It doesn't guarantee, excuse me, Cindy, success, but enables you to find out where the information is located. It gives you a direction that you have to do A, B, and C. And in order to get A, B, and C done, you have to research something, you have to discover it, you have to then formulate it into a paper, a plan. And this is what life is all about. You learn every instance in life. Your mistakes are teaching points. Your successes are also teaching points. But college is like the key, it opens up the door to understanding. You can find things, you know where to find things. You're mandated to do certain things. You might not like it, but doing it and succeeding in it gives you another platform with which to take another step higher. I
Right.
found that college for me was an eye opener. It wasn't easy. I never thought it would be, but it was something that I felt would be the ticket to open the door to success. The master's degree ensured that. The college education gave me the stepping stone. The master's degree assured that. Once I answered an ad for my first job, I thought that my education was a thing that swung it to the point where they offered it to me. The individual who was the president of the company said that we selected you over a number of Ivy League graduates from Harvard, from various good. And he said, the reason we decided to do that is not only the master's degree, but the fact that you were an Army officer. You were willing to do certain things. You're airborne, paratrooper, you're ranger, the whole thing. And so it was a combination of two things. I've always believed that I can achieve. I wanted to achieve. I wanted to be the best I could be. I evidently was, to the extent that my career has been an extremely successful one. There wasn't, as I used to say to my boys and my wife, there wasn't a place on the planet that I would find myself at 5 o'clock that I couldn't ring up a friend and have a drink with them. And that's an awful lot. It is very interesting. Rob and my other son and Nan met many of the people I interacted with. We had several generals come, military people come to our house for dinner. We had some East Germans when there was a thaw during that period of time visit with us. A lot of people came. My sons saw people of different cultures, learned through that interaction, and were the benefits of a very unique upbringing. Many people don't have that experience.
Sure.
I, because of what I did, found these people continually knocking on my door.
Look at that. So on the personal side of things, so I have questions. First of all, I have to ask this because from what my research indicates, you have never done this before. I know that you're bilingual. So I thought immediately, because you're bilingual, he's going to be like, I'm doing 12 books. Every one of them is going to be in like 5 languages. Because I was like, if you can speak all those languages, would you convert all your books to different languages, or had you considered that?
I haven't, but in my books, I always put phrases in there. For instance, if I have a heroine or a hero or a protagonist that, let's say, is Spanish,
Sure.
I will always put in there something he'll say in Spanish, then in parentheses, I'll put the English translation. I've
Oh,
done
okay.
that. I've done that in my book, Kill Alexis Markovic, who happens to be a Russian in the
Okay.
United States, an enforcer, a woman enforcer for a Russian cartel in the United States. Many of the things she says is in Russian, not a whole lot, but enough. And in
Sure.
parentheses, I'll translate that for the English speaking. And I do that in several languages. I've done it in Korean. Uh, I lived there, as I mentioned, for almost 4.5 years. Speak the language pretty well. I certainly can order a good meal at a Korean restaurant and bring a few laughs at the waiter and waitresses. Anyway, yes, I always do that. I
Okay.
put my languages into these books in various phrases. Always have a Spanish guy, the Russian,
Right.
Korean. Yes.
Now, I also know that you have dabbled in the martial arts before. Question for this. Very recently, someone said to me, one of the biggest benefits about martial arts is that it helps to not only relax the brain, but in some ways enhance it, which I'm guessing for you would have helped in terms of being a writer. Is that indeed true? Meaning that sort of physical exercise that you participated in, is that helpful to that?
I think so. I think you have to have a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
When you write, you have to be a writer continuously. You can't write today and 3 weeks from now you come back to it and start again. The martial arts teaches you that success is the only achievement that one should aspire to. If you're a success, you can be a success in many ways. In the physical sense, in the mental sense, knowing that you are capable of hurting another human being and yet putting that into a positive bent, meaning that what you've learned can come into a value situation should you find yourself in a difficult situation. I bring that into my book, where one of the women is a karate person, black belt, etc. In fact, that was just the recent book that I finished, A Woman to Die For. But I found that the martial arts teaches you and gives you a lifestyle which you always try to achieve.
Mm.
One step further is
Excuse
an
me.
advancement. One step learned is something useful to be stored away for a future time or to be put in practice at the present time. I found that the demands on my physical body were as strong as my mental. when we would engage each other, you had to have a discipline where you could not physically and obviously strike another person. You had to be able to stop at that particular point. Otherwise, you would seriously injure them. I happened to be the only American in that class at that time in Korea, and I found that Koreans were somewhat apprehensive. They're smaller than I am. I'm 6 feet tall, weigh about 190 pounds. I was pretty good shape then too. They were somewhat apprehensive. Not only they felt that they didn't want to insult the foreign devil, quote to speak, but they didn't want to hurt me in any way. So they were apprehensive. Once that I engaged them and then told them, please consider me like yourself. Do what you have to do to learn. I'm capable of taking the fall. I've shown how to take that fall. I've been taught, etc., etc. And once we did that, we had a better relationship. And the martial arts, as I say, teaches you self-discipline. It teaches you the ability to know that you can trust your instincts, yourself in any situation, and you're capable of overcoming most difficulties. I've always believed that. It's been my entire life, from my dad telling me to stay calm to believing in myself that I could accomplish anything through his taxi driving, the fact that he went to school, lawyer, the whole bit. And the word, as I said before, Cindy, can't is not in my vocabulary. When I hear a young man say that, I always have a feeling, please don't use that word around me. There is no such word in my vocabulary, and it shouldn't be in yours either. The other thing I found that my parents have taught me, my mother, as I say, were immigrant parents. My mother had no formal education, but she learned and she taught me manners. And my dad and mom often said, it doesn't cost anything to be polite.
Yes.
You could be in a room and you may not like most of those people. You must never let them know you don't like them. It doesn't cost anything to say hello, to wave, to say thank you and you're welcome. And these are the things that I've lived by. And people can have PhDs in their family, they can have professional men of all stripes and women, but you cannot teach humility and the right things to do with regard to manners unless you have a concerned parent. And these parents have taught me I give out lollipops on a certain occasion every week. And you'd be surprised, Cindy, how many people do not say thank you. And I say to them now, I didn't at the beginning, but I do now, that the proper way, if you enjoy the lollipops I give you, is to say thank you. And I will always say you are welcome. And this is I find that you have to be a teacher sometime. And
Yes.
if you teach in the right way, respectfully, not talk down to a person, but talk equally to them, they will receive what you want to tell them in a much, much better way.
You
This
betcha.
is my life. I've learned a lot from good, bad, and indifferent people. And I was formulated early on, as I say, by immigrant parents who taught me right from wrong, to have manners, to be respectful for other people, to not judge a book by its cover, although some do. In my case, you judge by book by cover, depending on what they want to read. But I find that once you get to know somebody, first impressions may not always be the true impression. Some people are hesitant, some people are shy, other people are outgoing. You have to look at a person, judge them by how they are, the manners they exhibit. I find it very difficult to be with people that don't have good manners. I find speech doesn't matter. They can bastardize English language if they have to. But when you have manners, you have everything. Because if you're polite, you're understanding. If you can consider the other person and be polite to them regardless of what they are, you've grown an inch or two in your own measure.
Absolutely. Now, if I were to ask you, did you win the wife because you can play the piano? Because I'm guessing
Ooh,
woman doesn't love that. Hello?
yeah, that helped in a way, Cindy. I've composed some lyrics and music. I've dedicated some songs to Nancy. Um, It's always been an outlet for me. I enjoy playing the piano. I find that if I need a means to come down from a high or get up from a low, I can go to that piano and I can lose myself.
Sure.
I can sit and play. 10 minutes later, 3 songs later, I can get up and I feel refreshed and I can go on with whatever I do.
Hmm.
I find it a gift. I'm thankful for that gift, as I am for many gifts that I have. I gave back. One young mother approached me, this was several years ago, and had heard me play and said to me, not in so many words, but in so many words, I can't afford to pay for a pianist, but my son would love to play the piano.
Aw.
Would you be interested in teaching him? And the answer was certainly, sure, why not? Why not? Gives me an opportunity to interact with a young man, and maybe I can give him a foundation that some of the things that I've grown up with. And in the process, he can learn to play the piano as well. And
Sure.
we just went together for about a year and a half. He didn't do too badly. And I just said to him that, look, our time is over now. If you find a piano or you can get yourself a keyboard at some point, sit down and continue to play. You won't forget the notes. You won't forget the songs. Just find a piano and keep it going and enjoy it. And perhaps someday when you have children of your own, so forth and so on. So
Nice.
yes, I find that in this life, you have to give back something. I will share with you. I wasn't going to, but I will. Um, I've always believed in giving back. I am involved with a group of people called the Friendship Circle. And what these people do is they are involved with both children and adults who are mentally and physically challenged. And I'm with them. I have a young man that seems to always want to be with me. We'll sit, we'll play games, we'll interact. I Before I got involved with this, I would see one or two of these autistic children. Never thought much of it, felt sorry for them. But when the opportunity came, somebody asked me would I become involved. The answer was, of course, yes. And that is one of the many ways that I give back.
Nice.
Whatever I can do to help somebody, I will do. Because life is not an independent and a solo journey. It involves a great number of people. And if
Yeah.
you can have a positive influence on someone who could emulate you and say, boy, that's the kind of woman, that's the kind of guy I want to be like, you've really accomplished something. And I want people to emulate me. When I go out, I am image conscious. I will not wear rundown clothing. I will look my best. I want people to just feel comfortable with me. I don't throw anything at them. I don't allude to anything. I just want the image to state who I am. And from that point, we can get more involved together. And anything that they want to know, I'll be more than happy to tell them.
There
But
you
that
go.
is me. That is what I feel. And this friendship circle has been a real eye opener for me. And in fact, we have what we call a social this Sunday again for 4 hours.
Sure.
I'll play my games, interact with the people, do whatever I can do to bring 4 hours of happiness. I find that because I'm an older guy, 61, I'm not a young guy anymore, right?
Right.
I find that the parents want somebody they can talk to, not necessarily Cindy with. They
Okay.
want a listener. They to tell me a difficulty or many difficulties they have with their daughter, with their son.
Sure.
And when they say, what do you think, Harris, or what would you recommend? Then and only then will I give an opinion. Otherwise, I'm their listener. And I find that not only can I interact with the several younger men that I interact with for those 4 hours, but I also can bring something to their parent. They find comfort in wanting to talk to me. As I
Mhm.
say, I'm an older guy, Santa Claus or whatever, and they feel that they can unburden. They can tell me things that they perhaps wouldn't tell other people, and I
Nice.
can sit and listen. And
Very
I
nice.
find that's another positive.
Hmm.
I've been able to expound on.
Now that we've been listening to you, here's the good question. Do you envision yourself at some point, because I know it might be difficult, a lot of us do book tours or virtual book tours and things along those lines. Would you envision yourself even doing maybe a half of a book tour or something in case people want to actually meet the author?
Yeah, I could, yeah, sure, of course, Cindy. I would. My days are long and they're filled, but yes, there's always time for something like that. It's interesting about books anyway. You wonder how you get your book out there to say to somebody, give me a shot at it.
Yep.
Maybe you'll find something in my writing that you'll enjoy, and maybe that'll motivate you to A, B, and C, and D. I found that my book on Vietnam, the shortest book I've written, about 120 pages,
Mhm.
is one of the biggest sellers both on Kindle and in print form. And people want to know what it was like. And I think I tell a story that is not over the top, but interesting enough that I can take a Spanish individual, a gang related individual who seeks to escape New York,
Mm.
joins the army as he thinks the only escape he has, and
Okay.
finds in Vietnam the things he left in New York, he's now facing life and death. And I bring him to wherever I bring him. I've found that people like this for some reason, and once they read one of these books, they'll try another. That's the most difficult thing for an author, to
Oh, yeah.
get somebody to try that first book. I could go on tour and I could sing the praises of how interesting my life has been in South America and Korea and all the wild people that I've met in Suriname and all these, and it doesn't intrigue the individual to the point maybe that they want to try something. But I found word of mouth, someone who has read my book that will come back and put a little burb on my
Right.
site and say, "Wow, this was good. I recommend you read Harris's XYZ book, whether it's Requiem for a Soldier or Life on the Dark Side." And that seems to get the people to try it. A book tour, he's singing his praises. Everything, every book you write by every author is the best book since Hemingway. We're all so good and we're the best. I don't consider myself the best. I consider myself an interesting writer where
Yes.
I can take a situation, embellish characters that I've met, and bring a person into that character and to live that situation that I've written about. They are part and parcel to every story that I write. There is something for everybody, whether it's a wayward daughter, whether it's a mafia type individual, whether it's an assassin, or whether it's an international businessman, whatever. They can find a piece of my story that they can say, that's me to this degree. And wow, look at where I'm going in that story. And that's where I want to take somebody.
So the gentleman that I've been talking to all this time, because I'm sure by now you guys are like, how do I find this guy? He's everywhere. So let me read it off here. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, Amazon and Goodreads, of course, for your written works. And of course, the website itself is Harris, and the last name is spelled KLIGMAN.com. So, Harris, this is what I want to say in conclusion. It's very simple. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your service to our country. And more importantly, I should say, almost as important as that is, thank you so much for being such a huge inspiration for many generations. It's very
And
much appreciated.
Cindy, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to, first of all, meet such a lovely young lady as you.
Oh gosh.
Enjoyed it. Reminiscing with you now brings back so many memories, so many interesting and difficult times, and stories that have yet to be told.